think my art just becomes some sort of way that I communicate these things that I do or these things that I'm interested in to others.
Ryan Buyssens was born and raised near Detroit, Michigan, an environment that imparted a rich, lifelong influence from the automotive industry's mechinized culture. An artist in the broadest sense of the word, he expresses his ideas through countless media. His current exhibition, Feedback, is on display at the Saginaw Art Museum through December 2022. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast here today. We're grateful to be hosting your exhibition Feedback at the Saginaw Art Museum, and interested really in learning more about yourself as an artist and the pieces that are in the exhibition. It's a little bit different than what people have experienced at the Saginaw Art Museum before. And I'd like to jump right in. And without giving too much away, how would you broadly describe the pieces in the exhibition to people that might not have visited yet?
Broadly, I guess, the one word, the buzzword that's been kind of going around for the show is interactive, right? So the artwork responds to you in a way. I believe the artwork's not finished if the person, the viewer, or the participant, I like to call them, isn't there. So the artwork kind of comes alive when somebody's in the room with it.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than what many people, I think about when they hear about an art museum or art generally. With a painting, people look at it, you can move closer, you can move further away. The sculpture, you can walk around it. And your pieces are different than that. I've watched guests walk in and wonder for a minute, like, what am I supposed to do here? Can you talk a little bit more about that response that audience have? Is that something that's sort of built in on purpose, or is it something designed, or is that just a secondary response? Do you feel like it's just secondary?
Well, it's something that, to be completely forward, I kind of stumbled on it. I was trying to make a method where my pieces wouldn't need a button to turn it on, or a switch, or a lever of some sort, that when somebody was in the room or near it, it would just start working. And what had happened was, as I was working with this whole process in my studio, I found that I was more interested in the fact that the artwork started working when I was near it than the artwork itself in some ways. And that whole action and cause for play or response from the person viewing it has become kind of the center of what I work with. Of course, the artwork is just as important. I said back there it wasn't, but I want there to be some sort of idea to be expressed or talked about, but I also want the element of surprise and play to be really instrumental in that experience of that idea, and that people get to kind of get immersed in the work in a different way. And for me, that's really important. So it has very many facets that I'm all working with at the same time. And all of them, I do my best to make it as purposeful and designed in as possible.
Well, I think that it's interesting. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that combination of some of the science and engineering with the artwork. In design, a lot of times it's for a functional purpose. So there's an artistic element to the way that a chair is designed, for instance, but then it serves a specific function. It feels like in the case of your pieces, there's this art and this idea, and then the science and engineering is layered on top of that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the way that you develop the vision for a piece and the way that you use that science and engineering in association with the art. So, you might have an art idea and then you have to build around that. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess it's hard to say where my ideas come from because I'm really most of the time super scatterbrained, and I spend lots of time in my studio just messing around with things, taking stuff apart, putting stuff together, just trying to break things in some weird ways, and it just that's kind of where my ideas come from. I like to disassemble and understand old tech, like old VCRs or old computers, or even mechanical old movie projectors and things like that. So that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from, is like discarded technology, discarded appliances and things like that. I my whole life growing up, I was a science nerd. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an entomologist. And then the next week I wanted to be a geologist. And the week after that, it was chemistry. So I was always really interested in the sciences as well. And I really think that the sciences and art go together hand in hand. And in a lot of ways, through my studio tinkering and through my scientific interests and passions, I think my art just becomes some sort of way that I communicate these things that I do or these things that I'm interested in to others. There is like a caveat to that, and it's like I don't want my work to be about tech. Like I want it to talk about other things, things in nature, things in society, things in our lives, and not just talk about the technology that it's created with. Although all of that is on the surface and very visible and very much part of it, I don't want that to be the end message of the work as well.
Yeah, I think I understand that when somebody sees your piece, the immediate sort of surface layer is, oh, this is interesting, this is different, this is beeping at me, but it's doing that for this other reason, or to say something beyond just what the mechanics are in a way. I guess, can you talk a little bit more about some of those themes in your work that move people beyond just observing the beeps and visual images or mechanics of your pieces? Love to hear more about especially that element of nature that you described.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people gravitate toward the piece that consists of the wings, titled Resistance, And for me, that was a technical challenge of trying to make mechanical wings that flapped as realistically as possible and as smoothly as possible. And I went through lots of iterations and design attempts in order to make it happen that way. As Leonardo da Vinci was inspired by the ornithopter, as am I. And I guess there's that technical design challenge, but there's also like this tension within the piece, and it tends to exist in most of my pieces, of like this freedom and this birds are these things that we keep in cages because there's kind of like the most free animal that exists, and I designed my bird, and then I cement it to the wall. It's attached to that wall. It can't go anywhere, and it's like pushing and tugging to escape that. And I want these themes and these kind of primal or very basic feelings to exist when anybody's viewing my piece. And I also want like anatomy and genetics and the ideas that this is some sort of evolution and continuation and a cyborg connection, that all of this is existing within that piece as well. So I don't know. I think of lots of different things and lots of different themes while I'm working on my work. My work tends to take immense amount of time to, from the conception to completion. So I have lots of different ideas that change while I'm making it. And, all of these kind of come to the forefront in it somehow. And again, it's kind of like a overwhelming as far as the amount of information that could be in it, but it also comes across as incredibly simple and forward.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the piece with the wings, it is interesting to consider like the complexity of a bird's wing, even the simplest bird that is outside my window right now, and then see the effort to replicate some of that motion and what it takes in terms of the effort to do that, and that contrast and complexity to achieve that. You mentioned a little bit about your process a moment ago about how things change as you're developing a piece. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, how sort of your original idea may evolve based on the materials that you're using or the way that your thought process changes, and learn how maybe some things might restrain the final outcome of a piece, if you feel like a piece is restrained. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I laugh because my process is kind of absurd. I have lots of like little projects happening in my studio at any given time, and if I were able to show you every single horizontal surface in my space is covered with piles of stuff. And, I'm always like working on one thing and then going to another. And I call it messing around or playing, because I'm always like trying to discover something or solve something or anywhere in between. And, sometimes that pile of stuff is next to another pile of stuff and it gets mixed together. So it's like, the old commercials, you've mixed your chocolate and my peanut butter. These things kind of come together when they shouldn't. And sometimes that makes a creation there. It's partly because of the immense amount of mess that I work in that I have such interesting revelations. So I try not to clean up too much, which it also slows me down. But all these different things that kind of come together, make these things happen for me. And sometimes, and very often, there's failures where something's not doing the thing that I expected. But is it doing something that's still interesting? Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. And if it is, then I keep pursuing that. And if it's not, then I acknowledge it and move on, right? And then eventually I stumble into something that kind of becomes, maybe a building block for something else. It becomes a piece in and of itself. And then I work with it. And sometimes it just becomes a medium where I say, oh, wow, I made this thing work. Now, how can I use that to express these ideas? And that's kind of, as far as the medium's concerned, I was working with the thermochromic paints and things like that. And that's where that piece Outlook comes from, which is the painting that says Outlook good. And when you walk up to it, the words not so appear. So it says Outlook not so good. That's like a process that a formula of working that I came up with that allows me to make that type of painting. And if I have an idea that I can express with that, then I make another one of those paintings. And in the case of like the piece Inflorescence, which is all those little televisions and speakers that buzzes and whirs when you go by, that's something that I had kicking around on my studio bench for, I don't know, almost 2 years of just like, I made this thing happen and made it work. And then I kind of didn't know what to do with it for a while. And it just kind of got mixed in with some other stuff and then came into fruition there. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself really well, but that's kind of how things work with me.
No, I think you described it real well. I get that visual. Almost like I imagine my children's Lego table. They have this table that they build Legos on, and they look like they're all over the place, but somehow they combine all the pieces and put them together.
Legos were a favorite toy of mine in the past. Yeah, so it's kind of like that.
Does when you're constructing your art and engineering it, do you think about how the art is going to be placed or the environment that it's placed in? So, in this case, the pieces are in a museum. There's a very deliberate setup of these pieces. Does that factor in at all as you're engineering and constructing and using materials?
I guess that's something I can be kind of thankful for, my schooling on is I learned to make my work within like the built environment, the gallery environment, the gallery space. And I guess that's kind of what I respond to. So, the four white walls, as you say, and my work is to kind of be built into that or attached to it in some way. So, I as we kind of communicated back and forth. I was really concerned with the space layout of the museum itself and where my work was going to be, so I could kind of plan for how I was going to arrange it. And I mean, to some degree, I still had a lot that was up in the air, like, oh, this could go there. We'll see when I'm actually in the space. But so my work isn't really designed to, be installed out in some woods or lake or something like that. Not that it can't be, but it's very much designed for that gallery space, that kind of austere or clinical environment that you walk in and it hopefully is transformed with the pieces that I'm using.
It's interesting too, the way that the exhibition is set up, how people, the individual pieces, there's an interactive element, but the exhibition space itself becomes this interactive environment, and how that sort of, in a way, creates this bigger story, the bigger picture of the whole exhibition.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. I also I was really concerned with flow and how when you're walking through the space, what you can see and experience as you're moving through it. So yeah, that kind of helps articulate that.
So looking into the future, just a touch, if you're able, you mentioned that you have a lot of projects spread out all over the place, in a way. So maybe this is a challenging question to frame, but are there some goals or ambitions that you have for your work or for where your pieces end up, moving and looking towards the future?
Well, I don't know if I have any like concrete goals, but as can be seen, in the newest piece that's in the show, I mentioned it, Inflorescence. I'm working a little bit more with video and audio, and it's something that's kind of come out of a kind of an offshoot of my interests, and I've been working with some music and video synthesizer equipment, and I'm really interested in like what kinds of hardware itself can generate visual and audio signals. So that's something that kind of came to fruition in that piece, and that's something that I'm still kind of working toward and experimenting with. So we'll see where that leads. But that also kind of neglects something that is really central to my work, and that's the mechanical aspect of it. Because there's really no moving parts in that piece. So like mechanisms and mechanical devices are really central to how I think even. So even though that's kind of like an exploration of mine, I don't want to forget or negate the fact that I'll make pieces with moving parts and that are kind of animatronic, so to speak, or automata based. And I think, I'm always working in kind of different directions at the same time. And I'd like to see if I can combine some of that, combine some like video, audio-esque work with the mechanical.
Well, it is very interesting to learn a little bit more about yourself and the thought process in your creation. We are grateful to have this exhibition at the museum, and wish you all the best as you continue onward.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Temple Arts Podcast. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and making a donation to the arts through SaginawArtMuseum.org or TempleTheater.com. This will allow us to continue to bring enriching program to Saginaw and beyond.